Okay, all right, so let's get started. What I want to talk about is how to use the work to make money. And before I do that, though, I do want to show you that, this is where you're going to find a bunch of videos that can really help you figure out what's going on. First of all, if you want to look at the basics of what I do and have a better understanding of the methodology, you should watch this video. Okay, it's just under an hour, but it goes over all, retracements, extensions, projections. I believe it also does talk about timing, and if you want to learn more about timing, you can actually go to this video, which is just about an hour long, and there's a bunch of information as far as the timing work is concerned. Other things you can look at, this is just a very short video in what we're supposed to look for when we see timing cycles. Like, we're in a time window for a high right now, and I don't know if that high is going to hold, but we did definitely have a reversal, so it seems like those kicked in. There are a few others that come in on the back pages. I'm not sure why they have it organized this way, but there's a whole video that talks about symmetry if you want to understand more about that, because you could just use symmetry to trade. If you notice the symmetry that we had on a couple of those index trades, that's all you need to do. I mean, you could just trade with symmetry alone if you didn't want to run anything else. There's also a couple of videos on how to set up the price tools in Thinkorswim if you like that program at all. And then there's some other ones that are on top of, or that are on Dynamic Trader software, which is what I use, and you don't really need to look at those unless you're interested in the software. So anyway, that's the place to find those. Now, when I send out the little message, here and there with those links to find things, well, the other thing that you want to find is, it's going to be the box.com folder. Okay, there's a suggested swing trading plan that you can download. There are overall guidelines that explain, a bit about the methodology and the triggers. And then there's also a basic day trading plan. So you definitely want to grab those if you have not gotten them yet, okay? Because the way you make money with this work is setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. But one of the things is that a lot of you probably don't understand what a setup is, so I am going to go over those. So let's I wish this guy would get the hell out of my yard. Anyway, I don't know if you're hearing that, but yeah, thanks a lot, dude. Anyway, so as far as going over, how to use the work, first of all, there are 3 setups that I use, okay? And the first setup is basically a price cluster. Okay, and a price cluster is the coincidence of at least 3 Fibonacci price relationships that come together within a relatively tight range. That is one of my setups. The other setup is a symmetry setup. So a single symmetry line by itself is a setup. So that's another, acceptable trade to look at. And then the last setup that I look at is just, it's also a cluster, but it's really a 2-step pattern setup. And that's what we saw yesterday in Amazon was pretty much a textbook 2-step pattern setup. So I only use these 3 setups. So if you see those levels on the charts, you can look to trade against them. That's going to be, or those will be the best decisions to look at. Now, there are going to be times where you just have, maybe a single level or 2 levels and it's not an official setup. If you choose to, you can use those to define risk, but they're not the official setups. Personally, I prefer to see at least a symmetry decision or at least a price cluster before getting, too excited about taking a trade against levels. Because bottom line, all I'm doing is running key support and resistance decisions for you all day long. Okay, and obviously as the market unfolds, these change. And then, after that, we'll go through some examples. And I know I gave you that video. Let's see if I have any of these other charts in here. Okay, here it is. So again, this is just an example of, well, this is not going to help because we had the setup here. It did make the first target. That was a $44 rally. But let me just show you an example that's more current. So let's see if we can find. Okay, not this. Okay, so like this is one of the charts that I had up this morning. Okay, now this again was not an official setup, but you're dealing with support and resistance. If it gets up into resistance and you want to be a seller, just go to the lower time frame chart and look for a sell trigger. Now for day trade decisions, typically you can use a 1 minute or a 2 minute chart. So let's look at some of that. So again, this was not an official setup, but let's look at what a trigger would look like. So that is Netflix. Okay, and that high was made, that was 521.82. Now, there's two different things, or actually two different combos that that I would look at this point as far as the moving average crossover for the triggers. And the typical one that I've been using for years is the 834 EMA crossover to the downside. Okay, so for example, when after you made the high here, here's where you had the moving average crossover to the downside, and then as soon as it broke this low, that's when both of those occurred for a trigger. And at that point, your definition of risk would have been above this 521.82. But the other thing that I think some of you might want to try, and again, test it first. You know, you can test it with paper money to make sure that it's not going to give you too many false signals. But let's look at a 1 minute chart here, but instead with a 513 crossover. Okay, so I add the 513 template here. Let's make it where you can see it. Make those a little bit darker. Okay, and then this would get you in a little bit closer, but what I want to make sure is that it doesn't, you know, have too many false signals. And the way that you use it, obviously, is if we hit a key price relationship, then you can look for the trigger. So here, against that 521, no, that was 517. Hang on a second. Okay. There it is. Sorry about that, I was looking at the wrong part. So here, you know, if you use the 513, you would have the crossover here. And let's see if I can see where that prior swing low came in. Well, actually, I think you would have had to use this one. So once you had both the moving average crossover and you also took out a prior swing low, that's when it was okay to look at a short with a stop above here. And let's see what else. Not Google yet. Okay, and then let's also address though the swing trade triggers, because as far as the day trade triggers, you're looking at, you know, again, 1 minute chart or 2 minute chart with the moving average crossover. But for a swing trade, typically you want to see it also cross on a 15 minute or a 30 minute. So if we look at NVIDIA, okay, and you remember that the decision was this 521.99 to 522.12 area. Okay, it doesn't look like I'm going to have enough data on here, so maybe I'll look at a 2-minute chart. Okay, it's not giving it to me. I don't have enough days. Okay. All right, so let me just check this low. That is, okay, that was made at 5:22:04. Okay, right here. So for example, let's say you were using a 5-minute chart for a trigger. So that would have been triggered, after it hit and held the support. On a 5-minute, it had the crossover here, and then you also had taken out a prior swing high here. Okay, to make it a little bit easier to see. Here's the prior swing high, here's the crossover. Okay, once that occurred, that was a trigger on a 5-minute chart. But again, that's still for day trade decision. But as far as for a swing trade decision, you can always sneak in to the trade, for example, on a 5-minute chart. But then just don't keep it overnight unless it also triggers on the 15-minute chart or the 30-minute chart by the end of the day. Okay, so the triggers for day trades are different than the triggers for swing trades. All right, let's see if there's any other examples here. Okay, and then I also want to go over what you would use for a day trade trigger for S&P or Nasdaq. And what we like to use for that would be the 377 tick chart. I mean, you can use a 1-minute chart, but a lot of times that's going to be a little bit too far away from where your definition of risk is. That's a 1-minute chart. But if you use a 377 tick against a zone, okay, that's worth looking at. You'll definitely get triggered in a heck of a lot faster. So for example, you're just going to look for, again, well, I mean, this would be, didn't we make that extension in the S&P on the upside? I thought we made 2 targets. That may have been the other swing here. All right, anyway, as far as an example like of a trigger, again, you want to look at the moving average crossover, and that it takes out a prior swing low for the sell side. And for the buy side, exactly the opposite. Well, here's a crossover here, and then you also took out the prior swing high here. Are there any questions on anything that I've gone over so far? I mean, we had some great examples where we had that the buy setups on the 30-minute and the 30-minute charts on Nasdaq and S&P. We didn't quite make the target in Nasdaq off of that last decision, but we did have the resistance that showed up on the 120-minute chart. One of the other things that you can consider doing is a lot of these charts will allow you to put lines there. So if you want to, if you're just trading a few of the things that we look at, let's see if I can, I don't know if that's a trend line. I'm not sure if I can get it to go this way. Yeah, I guess I can. So you can actually put the levels on your charts so that you know that if it hits a zone that you should be looking for a trigger. So that's another way to do it. I know it's a little bit tedious to have to set those up, but that is an option. Okay, so let me check Tesla. Tesla is where? Not there. Okay, so in the case of, okay, I didn't have it on this chart. I have it on the other chart. We did have resistance. Let me check and see where I had. I guess it depends on where you took the trade from. But as far as, you know, can you keep a short overnight? I'd say absolutely yes. You know why? Because you had the crossover to the downside on the 30-minute chart. And then when I set up the resistance, it failed to take out the resistance. Now we do have a key decision that you'll still have to look at tomorrow. But here's what we can do. You can take the prior low to high swings, project it from the new low. Okay, there's going to be a few of these. This one might be 2. Yeah, we're a little bit through that. So the way I would look at it is you could probably keep the short if it doesn't take out the symmetry, you know, of this prior swing. You know, and that's coming from taking these prior low to high swings and then projecting them from the new low. So if you can stay underneath here, then I think, you know, keeping the short's okay. But if we end up holding this support, for example, and pushing through this resistance, then I would forget about the sell side. Okay, and then question, is this using the exponential moving average or simple? I use the exponential. Again, all this information is in those documents that I gave you, or that I've, you know, put out the links for. So that should be in the guidelines. I'm using 834 EMA on the intraday charts. And again, I just started watching, you know, the 513 also as another option, because it will trigger you in faster. But if you're not comfortable with it yet because you haven't used it, one of the things, you can just test it with your paper trades for now. Okay, question is, do I identify the 3 types of setups on the charts, color codes? Well, I don't really, you know, that's why I teach you how to look at them. So, for example, this is a symmetry decision right here. Is that a setup? Yeah. This is a symmetry decision plus a couple of extensions. Is that a setup? Yes. And as far as the color coding, I did a video on the color coding, but symmetry is always in red. 618 is always that pink. The extensions 1272 and 1618 are always green, because many moves tend to terminate at extensions, and that's where you take profits typically. And then, of course, you know, if you can see 3 or more price relationships, you know it's a cluster. And then you don't see the 2-step patterns as much as you do. I mean, if you remember the one that we had yesterday, a little bit difficult to see, but let me actually show you via the like a 15-minute chart. It might be a little bit easy to see. Okay, so this was the actual, where is my, here it is. So this was the actual 2-step pattern, and it did make target number 1. And this is what it looks like. Typically, the first swing is similar to the second swing. Okay, so if you measure that, this high to this low, that's 28.20. This high to this low, similar, not equal, but 27.02. So there was the 100% projection of the first swing down. And this is what, I had labeled on the chart. Okay, and then you also want to see an extension of the prior swing inside of the zigzag. So I also ran the low to the high. And I have to set this up where it shows all the projections. Okay, so this low to this high. So then there was a 1272 of that overlapped. And then let's see, third price relationship. I'm typically looking for a retracement that may also overlap. And in this case, we had the 50% retracement that overlapped the 1272 extension of this swing, that overlapped the 100% projection of this swing. Okay, that was the setup. And it hit, it held, and it rallied 44 bucks off of this two-step pattern. Okay, so either a symmetry setup by itself, a price cluster setup, or a two-step pattern setup, which is also a price cluster because you're going to have at least 3 price relationships that come together. Okay, but it also includes a zigzag pattern with that cluster. So if you are confused about maybe one of the charts that I might have up during the day, you could just ask me if it's a setup. Sometimes I do have time to run or just post that on the chart to let you know, like yesterday when I put that this was a two-step pattern setup. I mean, I'll try and do that, and I'll try and do that a little bit more often. But I'll tell you one thing, having the intraday charts up and including the S&P and Nasdaq, okay, had me running a little bit ragged. So just ask me in the, if you're in the Zoom room and you have a question about it. Okay, are there any other questions? I wanted to just start with the basics. I'm not really, this is not, I think I can probably get a little bit more organized and do a webinar with, with all that info that I have. This, I just wanted to give you a rough idea that, if you hit a zone and it holds, go down to the lower time frame chart and look for a trigger. I mean, that's all you have to do. Now, as far as like stops, I will tell you that, for example, initial stops either go underneath the low made prior to your buy signal, or underneath the low end of the zone, which in this case would have been underneath 31.56. That would be where the initial stop is, and then you do want to trail it up. But as far as, I'm going to run out of time because I still have to do an update and I have to do another session later somewhere else. So I'm just going to wrap this one up now, and yeah, we'll just do this again, but I'll get more of the example set up in advance for you. Okay, question is, do these fib levels work because everyone else is using them or because of the psychology? I think it's natural because, you can say that, if somebody sees like a major 618 retracement in some stock, a lot of people are going to be looking at that, okay? But when you actually do this work down to like 1 minute charts or 5 minute charts, people are not doing that, okay? I think it's a natural phenomenon. I could be wrong, but I've been doing this for years. I learned about this after the crash of 87. I think I started doing the work in around 89, and I've been doing this ever since. All right, so I'll get a little bit more organized for the next one with some more specific examples. But bottom line, please watch the videos, like those YouTube videos. As far as the triggers, I would look at the day trading plan for that. This is it's about a 9-minute video. And then I would also look at this is a trigger example for futures, where we're using the 377 tick chart. This is actually the video that I did for you guys yesterday, where we had the 2-step pattern into support, and it went over, those examples. And again, if you want to try the 513 crossover instead of the 834, that's fine, but I would test it first before, actually putting cash down on it. Alrighty then. Okay, so I gotta get back to work, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning. I hope that the watching the live charts is helping at least, and I think I'll just keep those indexes on there too. All right, have a great one, and I will see you guys tomorrow.